Hello everyone, my name is John Grace. I am sitting here with
Deborah Sutor.
And this is part 3 of our video series about the American Eagle bankruptcy TA. And this part will be concerned with sections 12 through 19. So, diving right into it, section 12 is about uniforms. And the first change we have in the uniform section is part of the concessionary package. Uniform points will be reduced on ratification from the current 20 points down to 12 points per year, and we will be giving up the ability to carry over points into the following year. Next is actually an enhancement to the contract. Company has agreed to replace lost or broken sets of wings at no charge. Next, the company will provide and pay for name tags. So, a couple of freebies there. Next up is the company replacement of required uniform items if damaged while on the aircraft or if they've been stolen from a company-controlled area.
Yes, previously there was only contract language that addressed stolen items from an aircraft. We've enlarged the scope of that to include now company-controlled areas. So, for example, the crew lounge. If you'd had something stolen from the crew lounge, it would be replaced.
Okay, the next point is another part of the concessionary package. We have eliminated all of the cleaning allowance for everyone. There used to be a grandfather clause for some flight attendants from some of the pre-Eagle merger carriers. That's been erased also. So as part of the give back, all flight attendants will now give up the cleaning allowance. Next up is maternity uniform charge. For those flight attendants who will go out on maternity leave and for whatever reason they fail to return their maternity items, which were loaned by in-flight, those items will the cost of those items will now be reduced to 50%. And that's it for uniforms. We'll move straight on into Section 14, Seniority. In Section 14, Seniority, the first point is actually has to do with company transfers in a new hire class. If we have 2 or more company transferees who are in the same new hire class, their relative seniority will be determined by years of service with the company. Next up, seniority lists for bidding will be posted each month in crew rooms and on the company website. And the last portion for Section 14, Seniority. A copy of the American Eagle System Seniority List shall be published as of the date of ratification, so everyone can see where they are on the Master Seniority List. That takes us into Section 15, Filling of Vacancies. In Section 15, our first talking point is the ability to change move days other than the final 3 days of the bid month.
Yes, normally the moving days will be plotted for the last 3 days of the bid month, and that just happens automatically. But you have the ability to go ahead. There was a side letter on this, and we simply incorporated that language back into the agreement, that you can change those 3 move days to any other 3 days within the month, the bid month that you'd like.
All right, and there's an additional enhancement for flight attendants who transfer bases. Once a flight attendant is awarded a base transfer or on their initial base assignment, an A-12 will be provided to their new domicile in order to obtain a new CETA badge. Next, a flight attendant who bids and is awarded TDY and who has vacation during the TDY period will be required to be paid out for any vacation days that fall within the TDY period, and thus they will have to remain available for assignment during the time they previously had scheduled for vacation. This was kind of a big one. We were having difficulty with TDY, flight attendants being awarded TDY who had vacation for the whole month and therefore not actually reporting to the TDY assignment, which kind of defeats the purpose of TDY.
Yes, this is very similar to the provision that the pilots have. This won't prohibit you from bidding a TDY position if you have vacation, just to clarify, but it will prohibit you from actually taking it. So, when you bid TDY, just know that if you have vacation, you'll be paid out. You won't be able to receive the time off during that. So if you want the time off, just probably shouldn't bid TDY for that particular time period.
Okay, the next bit is a TDY cap. I can't actually imagine this would ever happen, but maybe it would. If a flight attendant were involuntarily assigned to more than one TDY, that would be capped. And the cap is exactly 1. They won't be assigned to any more than one TDY assignment in a 12-month period involuntarily.
Yeah, I can't imagine that either. That usually goes pretty senior, John.
Yeah, it sure does, Deb and Armando. Okay, moving on. Next, a flight attendant whose schedule must be altered to accommodate deadheading to or from a TDY assignment within the current month or in the TDY month, and who subsequently loses time will be pay protected for any time lost due to the scheduling of the deadhead. That's actually, I think, common sense, and I think it's our current practice that we just cemented into contract language. And the last part for Section 15 on a relocation visit.
That's actually for site visits for new hotels. So that's AFA normally would have to pay for it and be reimbursed. And there's this whole long process. And, sometimes that has interfered with the AFA's ability to go on these site visits, and we want to be sure that your union is present in all site visits. So the company has now agreed to go ahead and provide the AFA hotel rep with a room for these site visits.
Next up is Section 17, Furlough, Displacement, and Recall. And this section actually can be pretty involved, but we'll do our best to run through it and explain it. I think essentially what we've done in this section is to capture current practice and have it cemented into contract language. Now, when we're talking about furlough, displacement, and recall, it's important to understand that essentially we're talking about two different kinds of events. The first type of event is a reduction in force. And when we say reduction in force, what we mean is furlough. Flight attendants are going to be furloughed, and there's going to be some events taking place around the furlough. So here's what we've cemented into reduction in force, or furlough. First, there'll be an offer of voluntary furlough prior to involuntarily furloughing flight attendants. Secondly, we've created clear timelines for notice of furlough and also for recall. Third, company-paid moving expenses for flight attendants accepting recall to a base other than the base from which they've been furloughed has been included. 4, and finally, we have a provision to bypass recall to the extent that there are no more junior flight attendants from that domicile who have not been recalled. Now, moving on to the second type of event within Section 17, here we're talking about a realignment of headcount with no reduction in force. So, in other words, no one is being furloughed, but the company needs to have flight attendants moved from one place to another for staffing. Here, and again, there are 4 provisions. The first provision, we've changed the required percentage of headcount overage at a base from the current 25% overage to 20% overage. Secondly, we've defined at what point the 20% headcount overage is captured, because that was a little bit slippery in past practice. Third, the company will pay moves provided for flight attendants who opt to voluntarily transfer and displace, and I think we touched on that in a previous section. And lastly, fourth, the ability to bypass recall to the domicile from which the flight attendant opted to take a voluntary furlough will be granted provided that there are more junior flight attendants still on voluntary furlough from that domicile. And the last point in Section 17 is the retention of vacation blocks. This is something new. In the past, when you went from one place to another, one domicile to another domicile, you would lose your vacation block. And under this language, when you are voluntarily or involuntarily displaced, your vacation block will follow you to the new domicile. That brings us to our next section. That's Section 18, Leaves of Absence. In Section 18, the very first point that we have is bereavement leave. Bereavement leave days no longer have to be taken consecutively. Flight attendant can designate which 3 of the 5 days will be paid. Second point, flight attendant on jury duty leave will be released for the entire day. And this came up because we actually had a flight attendant who was given a flight assignment later in the day after performing jury duty in the morning. And, we thought that was a bit much. So that's been carved out, and Once you have jury duty, you're released for the entire day. Next, unpaid leave granted for flight attendants who must appear in court due to a marital separation, divorce, adoption, custody arrangements or disputes, guardianship, probate, or if you're subpoenaed, etc., will be granted, provided that proper documentation has been provided.
Yeah, this is something that comes up on a regular basis, as a matter of fact, and there was previously no provision in the contract for flight attendants to receive time off when these kinds of events occurred. So this provision is pretty important. It will at least ensure that you're given the time off that you need to appear in court.
Okay, next up, an enhancement. Medical leave duration with this agreement will be increased to 5 years. Next, we have continued health coverage for 12 months for flight attendants who go out on any type of leave. Our next point, FMLA is now provided for domestic partners in the same manner as for spouses.
I think that's currently done as a company practice, but since we're not always sure about what our future holds here at this company, we felt it important to cement some of these things into the agreement. So now we have contract language that will protect you and provide for FMLA for domestic partners.
Okay, thanks, Deb. And the next enhancement that we have is actually for our men and women in uniform within the flight attendant ranks. Military leave will be expanded to include travel days if applicable. Next, flight attendant may substitute vacation for pay on any leave which is unpaid, which I believe is current practice.
Yeah, I believe it's current practice. But again, it's one of these things that wasn't in the contract. And so now that it is, that's a right that you have secured.
Okay, another enhancement, and I think this is a big one. I think it's, one that we definitely fought hard for. Essentially, we've ironed down that a flight attendant returning from a leave will be put back on paid status within 2 weeks from the date that all required information has been submitted to the company.
Yes, this will at least help you out when AA Medical drags their feet, which has become somewhat of a regular occurrence in returning flight attendants to work. If you've returned all of your paperwork and done everything that you need to do, there's absolutely no reason that you should still remain out in an unpaid status. So this provision protects you. If you've done everything that you need to do and it's just the company that's dragging their feet, then within 2 weeks you go back on a paid status.
Okay, so next up, and this is the last point in Section 18, training will be offered in a timely manner upon return from a leave, or the flight attendant will be placed back on paid status within 2 weeks. That concludes Section 18, Leaves of Absence, and that takes us into Section 19, Training. First up in Section 19, Training. No pay credit for touching legs, which fall outside of training days, which kind of extends our concessionary package. We mentioned earlier that all touching legs across the current contract will be eliminated, and this is one of the spots where touching legs, pay credit for touching legs will be taken away. Next, publication procedures remain the same, but an example will be provided for clarification of touching legs, so you can look for that on www.afaeagle.com. The company, in our next point, has kind of introduced a concept for computer-based training at home. And as you'll recall, many of you will recall, the company in their term sheet was pitching computer-based training for no pay.
Boo.
Not a fan. No fans out there for that. So what we have managed to secure is the following. For computer-based training, there will be an established panel of flight attendants who will go through said training, and 50% flight pay for the hours required to complete that training will be given. And there'll be a base minimum of 30 minutes of flight pay.
Yeah, and it's important to remember this panel of flight attendants that's going to go through the training and complete it to determine how long it takes will be comprised of some AFA members so that we can assure that this is being done in a fashion that we're comfortable with.
Yeah, not just by instructors who just zip through it in a minute. Okay, so the next change is another enhancement, but in fact we're memorializing one of our current practices so that it becomes enforceable within the contract, and that is that flight attendants will be provided positive space travel to and from training from not only their domicile, but also their airport of residence, which is done currently, but we just want to cinch that up in contract language. The next provision in Section 19 has to do with training dates, and we've specified that training may not be scheduled on December 24th or 25th, December 31st, and January 1st, except for new hire training. And again, that's just current practice. Next up, we have some new provisions for training failures. We've guaranteed that a flight attendant will be placed in a new training event within 7 days after failure. If not offered, the flight attendant will be pay protected.
We've had some trouble with this in the past too. So if there was somebody that had failed a training event, and perhaps there maybe over the holidays is generally when we've seen this come up, and there were no more scheduled training classes, that person is actually taken offline and not permitted to fly again until such time as they actually pass training. So we've had people go as long as a month waiting to be scheduled, or rescheduled, I should say, for training. So this provision was intended to address that kind of event.
Yeah, and offers some pay protection. So next up, we will be guaranteed a hotel in domicile if training is more than 3 days, or 3 days or more, as well as around-the-clock per diem. And this just goes to the flight attendants who happen to live in a domicile where training is conducted. The last provision here in Section 19 is a requirement for the company to provide a hotel room if a flight attendant is required to deadhead into the training city the night before training.
And then the last provision we have is a familiarization training. These are, the little things that they've done in the crew lounge, John, like try to get you to use the O2 tool to pop the, to practice popping the oxygen masks out. They've done that in the past. And
yeah, some new doodad that they want you to be aware of and get practice on.
Now, we weren't able to cement any pay, unfortunately, under bankruptcy for that. But what we have done is we've been able to limit the amount of times that they could do this to somebody in a given year. And that would be 3 times, no more than 3 times per year.